builder, and oftentimes it is used of either or, yeah. But it was kind of a builder, right? Either way. So stonemasons are important in the Bible. People who do the embroidery, like for the curtains, who do the gold work, the overlays, all throughout here are an important part of the ministry throughout the Bible. I think it's something good to keep in mind that God, He uses skilled craftsmen and artisans in His worship. So it's not just the choirs that sing, but somebody's got to make the instruments and the choir loft and the place and everything else that goes with it.
Technical difficulties, and Austin's not here, so. Yeah, so I thought we would show a picture of the tabernacle, and then the temple, the front of the temple there, the pillars in front there. That's going into the holy place, and then the Holy of Holies would be in the back. This is the court here for the priest in the front there. The altar would be there. There's the court of women out front. Court of Gentiles would be around. They had different entrance places into the temple for these people as well. So anyway, that's kind of the picture of what he built.
Yep. So the transition from the tabernacle, which was God's design, of a tent, kind of a temporary, if you will, building to the temple itself, which is a more permanent structure, does seem to be an indication of God's desire to make a permanent indwelling, a permanent home.
Yeah, only the priests could go into that area, and then only the high priest could go into the Holy of Holies, and then only once a year. So.
And in the tabernacle, the people would often assemble at the front gate.
Yeah.
And Moses could present to them and whatever. There's some debate about the tent of meeting, whether that was the tabernacle or whether that was actually Moses' tent. Because before they built the tabernacle, they would still meet at the tent of meeting, and so some think that that was Moses' tent, or later maybe it just got transferred to the tabernacle.
Yeah. So this is Solomon's temple here, and this is Herod's temple. There's, of course, a difference. Solomon is going to take a little over 7 years to build Solomon's, and it took 46 to build Herod's.
But he leveled and filled out that whole temple mount. See that big the temple mount was not a big rectangle, but he did a lot.
It's a mound, so you got to bring in all these stones to build the base for what is built, what is seen here.
So he built all that up. He built that huge courtyard, and he squared it off. And that's why the one wall that's left is the Wailing Wall, is one of those retaining walls that he used to kind of expand and build up the temple.
Yeah. Herod was quite a builder.
He was a lot of things.
He was a lot of things. He was a lot of things.
Yeah, he did one known as Herod's Temple.
Yeah.
As opposed to the Lord's Temple.
Yeah, right. So the tabernacle, and then of course Solomon's temple and Herod's temple. There's really basically only been 2 temples, because Herod's temple is a rebuilding of the second one that Zerubbabel, Esther, Nehemiah, that whole group was a part of. So Herod built up on the second temple. So there really wasn't a third. The third temple will take place in the tribulation, and that's the one that the Antichrist will desecrate. There has to be a temple in the millennium. I'm sorry, in the tribulation. And then, of course, in Ezekiel 40 through 48, you find the 4th temple, which is the one Jesus himself will build.
Yeah. This starts out 6:1 in the 480th year, after the people of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the months of Ziv, which is the 2nd month, he began to build the house of the Lord. Now this is really, really important. We did a little bit of biblical archaeology last week, because this sets the time frame in the Bible for these events. A lot of we talked a little bit last time about There's some archaeologists who hate the Bible, and they try to undermine everything about it. And many of them want to put the Exodus at around 1200 or so.
Yeah.
And they deny the historic accounts here. But for those biblical archaeologists, date the Exodus about 1445. And as we have seen here, the evidence for that is, of course, overwhelming because it's what the Bible says,
Yeah.
and it's written.
Most of them try to go off who was alive and who was ruling in Egypt, and then they really don't go on what happened with the Bible. And then, of course, David's reign is pretty clear, around 1,000, and Solomon 40 years later. And so those are very clear, and not only in the biblical text, but also in the Babylonian, the Assyrians. They all have those two reigning at the same time as the Bible does. So it's fairly clear. 1450, 1445 is a really good date. They call that an early date. So.
And God, this is actually a real blessing for God's people who want to go back and look at these things, because God, he lays out his timeline. He sets everything out. People go back and look at it, and they can see that these things are true.
Yeah. Now, there's only a couple places, maybe a few places in the scriptures where there's kind of like a one out, where you got to kind of lean on, like Daniel 9:27, where the prince comes from. There's a couple that kind of alludes, but Daniel 9:26, 9:27, this one, 6:1, they really set some good dates, some good, who the Antichrist is, some things that really pinpoint some things. And that's why, again, the dating of Daniel is, Jesus puts Daniel as a prophet, and of course they mess with that day, the J and the Q's and all that stuff. They mess with Daniel bad because, as we've talked about, Daniel 10 and 11 is so clear. But anyway.
So the house that King Solomon built for the Lord was 60 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. Now, if you take a cubit as 1.5 feet, right? Right. Somewhere around there, it'd be about 90 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 45 feet high. It's about a 4-story building.
Yeah. There was a couple different, there's an Egyptian cubit, there's a royal cubit. So it's either, the Bible believes it's either 18 or 21 inches. But we're going to go with the, if you go 1.5 times, you'll get pretty close to what it is.
It's just easier for you to do that math.
Yeah.
21.
1.5, yeah. Yeah, that's right, yeah. So the house that King Solomon built for the Lord was, he said. So the vestibule in front of the nave is the main area. It's kind of the colonnade, if you will, the long portion in the front, like it would be in the church, where you come in the big churches. It would kind of look like that area in the front of the temple. So the vestibule in front of that long area, high roof of the house, was 20 cubits long, equal to the width of the house, and 10 cubits deep in front of the house. And he made for the house windows with recessed frames. Now, of course, they're not going to have glass, but they are going to be vented because you have incense and you have all that kind of stuff going on, but it would keep the dust and those kinds of things out. So.
He also built a structure against the wall of the house, running around the walls of the house, both the nave and the inner sanctuary, and made side chambers all around. So they've got some storage going around the outside of the temple.
So now this is helpful a little bit, and especially if you get into Herod's temple as well, that when you start seeing the disciples meeting, remember, they'll talk about in Solomon's colonnade and on the Temple Mount and those kinds of things. Now you start seeing these portions which are on the side of the temple, and again, there's going to be larger areas of the Temple Mount is much bigger, but you start seeing where there's not just the temple, but now there's these additions. People are going to live alongside of this, or at least stay overnight. They're going to store the treasuries. They're going to store the vessels, those kinds of things in some of these rooms.
Yep. The lowest story was 5 cubits broad, the middle one 6 cubits broad, the third was 7 cubits broad. For on the outside of the house they made offsets on the wall, in order that the supporting beams should not be inserted into the walls of the house. So it's offset as it goes, but I'm not sure exactly how that fit. I've seen different versions of it.
When I studied this I said, okay, I'm not going to study all those little. I'm just not going to get into those kind of how they're offset. In fact, even reading them, you're actually reading commentaries. So
Yeah.
I'm not even going to get into those kinds of things. But
The house was built, it was with stone prepared at the quarry, so that neither hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron was heard in the house while it was being built. So these were quarried and brought and put in place. So this shows a level of coordination that is actually kind of quite extraordinary. They had to have everything that fit made at the quarry, and then
Yeah.
it had to come and it had to fit, it had to,
yeah.
it had to be able to be put in place.
So there's legend, and then there's history documentation. It seems like there's somebody at the quarry and somebody at the temple. They're coordinating, numbering the stones. We need one this length, this measurement, and the quarry would build it and number it somehow, and that would come. There's one legend that doesn't make sense, and that is about the cornerstone. In fact, I looked it up today. Even Chuck Smith mentions it, and there's lots of commentaries that mention the cornerstone, where the cornerstone got lost, and they found, and when it came about into the 6th or 7th year to put the cornerstone in, they said, well, where's the cornerstone? And so they say, well, Peter, the one that got rejected, because they said, well, this stone doesn't fit, and they threw it over the side. But and no commentaries mention this, but the cornerstone goes first. So none of those legends, and even Chuck Smith, I'm surprised he didn't mention that, but the cornerstone has to be set first, because the walls and everything. We visited a synagogue in Israel, and the cornerstone was misset so that the synagogue wasn't pointed in the right direction. You could stand back and see the foundation that was laid for the cornerstone to lay on, and the foundation was correct, but the walls were off, and because they laid that cornerstone wrong. So, and the Bible's very clear about Jesus being the cornerstone. And so I was going to say, as we go forward here, when we're listening to Peter, we're reading Paul about a living house. We're living stones in a living house. And we are the temple. And I know Gary has done some studies on this, and maybe it would be good for him to do it. And, at some other point, I know he's mentioned it a few Sundays ago. But when you think about the temple and how it was built, you can kind of look at the soul and the spirit and the body there, and God, going there. You can kind of look at it as the church as well, so the individual and the church. And that's kind of the concept here. So as we're going to read this stuff, remember that now we are the temple of God, and we are the living stones that are being placed with Jesus as the cornerstone. And who's the foundation? The apostles and the prophets, of which the house, you and I, are being set as stones, living stones, to that house. And then 1 Timothy, remember, chapter 3, I think, talks about us being the pillar, the church being the pillar and the buttress of truth. So it's really just very interesting how the Lord does that. This is supposed to be, just like Jesus is the fulfillment of the Old Testament. He's a living person, a man, God-man, of course. We can insert ourselves in here to some extent as well into this temple being built.
Yep, so the entrance for the lowest story was on the south side of the house, and one went up by stairs to the middle story, and from the middle story to the third. So he built the house and finished it, made a ceiling of the house of beams and planks of cedar. He built the structure against the whole house, 5 cubits high. It was joined to the house with timbers of cedar. So this is the storehouses being joined to the main temple, I think. Now the word of the Lord came to Solomon concerning this house you are building. If you will walk in my statutes and obey my rules and keep all my commandments and walk in them, then I will establish my word with you, which I spoke to David your father. This is a wonderful offer that God makes to Solomon. It's worth pointing out that he makes this offer to others as well, and there are many who turn their backs on it. In a sense, God makes this offer to everyone who is born into the world to follow him, right? To walk in his ways. And Jesus the light who lights everyone who comes into the world.
Now, what caught me today was when you're reading this, you're going to read some specifics about the temple and things before, and then soon after we're going to read some more. It's almost like the Lord is interrupting the reader in saying what he's told Solomon about this. Now, if we think about this, this is a conditional promise. And what is the Davidic promise? It's unconditional, that there will be a son. The Abrahamic promise is unconditional. The Davidic promise is unconditional. The Mosaic law promise is conditional. And so we have to say, well, what's going on here with Solomon? This is to him as a man, an individual. And he basically what he's saying is, if it's not you, it's going to be your son's son. You know, it's going to be Jesus. That's where this is pointing. But the promise, we're going to get into this actually, the next couple Sundays, where Jesus comes into Jerusalem, and he's been working with the Jews for 3.5 years. And some people say, well, that it wasn't a real offer. He did not come to save them. He came to blind them. And that's not the fact. The fact is the plan that he is going to blind them, and he did blind them for our sake, but we can't negate the fact that it was a real offer to the Jews. And that's what we need to understand here, that this was a real offer to Solomon, just like it's going to be to Jeroboam when the kingdom splits. Those were real offers, and they failed. That's why we need a Messiah.
And that, to me, this is with Solomon especially, is just really, really interesting, just like it is to Israel. There's this little poem in 2 Timothy. For if we died with him, we will also live with him. If we endure, we will also reign with him. If we deny him, he'll also deny us. If we are faithless, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny himself. Now, in Solomon's case, God's going to send him a prophet, right?
Yeah.
He's going to tell him, because you have turned your back on the Lord and worshiped these other gods, he's going to tear the kingdom from you, but not in your days. Tell him, oh, that's good, not in my days. And because of God's promise to David, it's just really interesting. God's faithfulness in spite of like Solomon's disobedience, Israel's disobedience. God's going to leave this temple. It's going to be destroyed. They're going to be carried away to Babylon. God's going to bring them back. Yeah. They're going to be driven out of the land, but we've seen them come back because God is faithful to these covenant promises. There's a little video series on Navigators. It's worth checking out on their evangelism. But he talks about men praying over these covenant promises, that God will use me to fulfill his promises through these men, especially through David, to the nations. So, we fail, but God remains faithful to his word. Yeah.
So, the tension is that we are warned. In fact, we talked about it in the room that, like Habakkuk and even Paul will say, that the just shall live by faith. So when tough times come, you have to live by faith, and we can't be faithless. He remains faithful. But you cannot be plucked out of his hand either. There is an election, there's a predestination, and yet we're warned not to stray away. We're warned not to allow Satan to take that seed from us. And so we've got both of those things going, and we've talked about tension before. So
it is fascinating. Solomon's not the only one. There's the other one where God says these things will happen, but not in your lifetime. And The guy says, well, that's good, you know.
Hezekiah.
Hezekiah,
Yeah.
you know. Just
Yeah.
God's,
And he was,
yeah.
you know, I'm glad it's not going to happen in my lifetime. Yeah, right. Yeah.
But it just fascinates me, God's faithfulness
Yeah,
in spite of his treachery.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, if you walk in my statutes and obey my rules, we cannot get away from obedience and keeping his law.
If we, especially if
Yeah.
we want his blessing, if we want his mercy,
Yeah.
if we want his,
Yeah.
his grace, you know, just,
It is an astounding thing that Jesus, when he came, he turned it into a love issue.
yeah.
What is the first and the second commandment? Is to love your God. If you're going to love him, Jesus said, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. And so that is really the new covenant, which is promised to Israel. They don't have that yet. You got into the Jewish new covenant before the Jews did. And yet it is still going to be offered to them. But once you're there, the gifts of God, it says, are irrevocable. It will not be taken from you. And yet we are mandated to love him, and the revelation of that is that we obey him. So it's an interesting thing. And I think that the ones that love him want to obey him, don't we? Yeah.
So I will dwell among the children of Israel and not forsake my people, Israel. Do mark this as you read the Bible, God's desire to dwell among his people. Was told that this was the heartbeat of God throughout the whole Bible, that I will dwell among them and be their God, and they will be my people. Emmanuel, God with us. And you get to Revelation, the New Jerusalem comes down, and what is the deal? Now God is dwelling among them in verse 3. I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is among men, and he will dwell among them, and they shall be his people. God himself will be among them and be their God.
And yet in the New Jerusalem, there's no temple. There's no ark, because God and Jesus are there. The Father and the Son are there. So when we go back, and this is really difficult. This is where I wish the churches would have kind of hammered home a little bit. Another issue is this, that the tabernacle was about God wanting to dwell among the Israelites. And it said, we're going to find out here soon, that he doesn't dwell in a place made with hands. But he wanted to so much let the people know that I am with you, and here's the tabernacle, a filthy piece of stuff in the dirty desert. Now there's a building going up. It's the concept of God wanting to dwell with us.
And you see that through the whole thing. I mean, the fellowship offerings, all this stuff the Bible talks about. Yeah. The heartbeat of God, his desire to be with his people. Yeah. And of course, the New Testament, that means bringing us into his family, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So
Solomon built the house and finished it. He lined the walls of the house on the inside with boards of cedar. From the floor of the house to the walls of the ceiling, he covered them on the inside with wood, and he covered the floor of the house with the boards of cypress. He built 20 cubits of the near of the house with boards of cedar from the floor to the walls, and he built this within an inner sanctuary as the most holy place. There's an actual cube inside. It's in the back, but it's basically a cube, 30 by 30 by 30, if I remember, and it is the most holy place where the priest can go in once a year. Now, the book of Hebrews specifically talks about two things. One, Jesus entered the Holy of Holies. We want to suggest that whatever is being shown to Moses and shown to David and shown to Solomon is a spiritual concept in heaven. So that the throne of God is in heaven, the ark, Jesus, is in heaven, the word is in heaven, all those kinds of things. And there's a projection of heaven, if you will, on earth. And that's kind of what's happening here. So that in the book of Hebrews, you see that clearly, that he entered the most holy place that wasn't on the earth, that was in heaven. And he revealed himself as the sacrificed lamb to his Father. So it's just these things are to be taken, Paul says, as examples and revelations to us that we with our physical eyes and really our imagination, our spiritual eyes, when we read the word, that we can see what God is doing.
Absolutely. And our ability to enter into the presence of God through the blood of Christ
Right.
is one of the most extraordinary
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
in the Bible.
Yeah. So the most holy place, the holy priest, the high priest would go in once a year, and of course Jesus went in once and for all. The curtain between the Holy of Holies and the holy place and the Holy of Holies is ripped, okay, torn down, so that everybody who's a believer can go in. Now, here, if you go back to the idea of the temple, there's the holy place and the most holy place. And the priest could only go into the holy place. The highest priest, the high priest could only go, is the only one that could go into the most holy. But the curtain is torn down so that the idea is that all these priests can go into the holy place. Now, who are the priests today? That's you and me. We're not standing out in the court of women or the court of the Gentiles, which is even further out, okay? We are in the holy place, but the curtain is taken down between the holy place and the Holy of Holies. And you are offered to go in. That's what chapter 14 and 15 and 16 of John is all about, that you can go directly to the Father.
And Hebrews 11 here, therefore, brethren, since we have confidence to enter the holy place by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way, on down to verse 22, let us draw near with a sincere heart in full assurance of faith.
Yeah.
Faith.
Yeah.
Keep your faith in tumultuous times. When you don't feel like it, you just make the choice. I don't know how many times I prayed that. Lord, I choose to believe in you. I choose to love you, even though I can't see what in the world you're doing, or why these things are happening. Yeah. You choose to believe. It has to be an act of will, not just an emotional response.
Yeah. We act like we're on the outer court and can't go in. We act like we're not able to go in, it's too irreverent, or whatever it is. We're sinners, whatever it is. And yet, there's two things that you need to keep in mind. One, you are a part of a royal priesthood. It's not like you're in and out. I mean, if we sin one day, if we have a problem, it's not like you're out. It's like, that's why you go to the altar. Remember, the altar is, if you sin, you go, you take a burnt offering, you do those kinds of things. We don't have to do that. Jesus did that. So you need to have the full assurance that, one, I'm not the priest, I'm part of a royal priesthood. Two, that curtain's not there. There's nothing keeping you from going in, except I'm not worthy. Let me say this with all the love I can muster. If we act like that, that is a lack of faith. So that when God went to King Ahab and said, ask what you will, make it to the lowest depths of the earth, or the highest of heaven, and what did the king say? I better not do that. I'm not going to tempt the Lord. And so when we say, I can't go in there, that's not true faith. It's not reality.
Yeah. All right.
Go in, no matter what you feel. Go in.
So he built, where are we at? The house that is the nave in front of the inner sanctuary is 40 cubits long. The cedar within the house was carved in the forms of gourds and open flowers. All was cedar, no stone was seen. Yeah. That's just really interesting. Yeah. Cedar is a picture of a living wood, a living thing, and it is carved. So there's an artistry in here. There's all of that good.
So I've done some study in the past, and this is kind of the best I can make of this. If you go back, and again, Gary would know more about this than I do, but when you go back and see how the tabernacle was built, what was it built with? Dolphins' skins of rams, if I remember right. There's all these kinds of things that were incorporated into the tabernacle. And we would say, well, that's what was available. No, God was very particular to Moses that he got things from the land, he got things from the sea, he got all this kind of stuff. So that when the tabernacle goes up, we're going to see specific things going in here, and this is the best I can come up with. That when when Eden was first created, it grew without any help. The only work that the men had to do was to go pick fruit. Go pick what you're going to eat. They did not have to work the ground. Remember, Adam sinned, he had to work the ground. Cain sinned again, he was driven from the ground, okay? The concept, I believe, is this, that heaven is God's throne. What is earth? His footstool. It doesn't mean that it's another separation, it's a place. It is a part of where God dwells with man. But sin has cut that off. See, Adam turned that realm over to Satan. The point here is that God dwells on earth. Eden was a part of that, I believe. And we know that because Adam and the boys were priests, right? They were bringing sacrifices. They were told to bring sacrifices. So I believe that earth is supposed to be this kind of a concept of a sanctuary for God. The footstool, but the sanctuary nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that the cedar was used for the inside and it was carved elaborately. The inner sanctuary, he prepared in the innermost part of the house to set there the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. This, of course, is the Holy of Holies. The inner sanctuary, 20 cubits long, it is, it's 30 feet, right? 20 cubits wide, 20 cubits high. Overlaid it with pure gold. He also overlaid an altar of cedar. And Solomon overlaid the inside of the house with pure gold. He drew chains of gold across in front of the inner sanctuary and overlaid it with gold. Now, I know Solomon knew what he was doing. He covered up all that beautiful wood, just like people. Yeah, you get an old house, but you do that nice old woodwork, you paint it over.
Yeah.
Oh.
I got a cedar, remember that cedar table? If those have been to the house, I've got a cedar table, old growth cedar that the business I worked for, the people they bought it from dug it out of a pond, and there's no knots in it. It is just absolutely gorgeous stuff, and expensive. They gave it to me, by the way. Now, think about this. This is a cube, 30 by 30 by 30. What is the New Jerusalem? A cube.
Or pyramid.
No, it says as wide as it is tall. Anyway.
Pyramid's as wide as it is tall. The mountain of the Lord. Just follow that through the Bible and see what it is.
Anyway, it measures, I can just say this, it measures 1,200 miles by 1,200 miles by 1,200 miles. It is very large. But the idea was, and this is what I took it from it was a cube. Now, the New Jerusalem specifically says that Jesus is there, there's no Son, the Father is there, all those kinds of things. It just looks like the Holy of Holies to me. I mean, in my imagination, that's what I pick up there. And by the way, we're going to get into how much gold, 100,000 talents of gold.
It's a lot of gold.
All these trees, all these stones. We're going to get into the precious stones and all the stuff that was. And I tried to Google, because now AI is everywhere. And I tried to Google how much it would cost to build Solomon's temple, just a temple. And the estimates are around $300 billion just for the temple. And we're going to see that Solomon's house is twice as big. It doesn't have as much gold, but it's twice as big. And some of the chambers and other things that he built were all about all that cedar. By the way, about the cedar, Lebanon cedar, they still have some trees there. They're not very many. People blame the Turks for tearing them all down. The Turks tore most of the last ones down, but the Phoenicians were the first ones besides Solomon. The Phoenicians were the first ones to use that wood to build their boats. And also then it says the Romans butchered a lot of trees, and then Turkey came in and built lots of railroad tracks, and they used most of them for railroad tracks, it says. So really interesting stuff.
It is.
There's some trees there. We had a conversation here a couple weeks ago. I believe that when Jesus comes back, and I've got a lesson on Lebanon, I believe when Jesus comes back, there's so many tree seedlings in Lebanon. That ground is a mess. I believe that Lebanon's going to sprout again.
I think the whole world's going to sprout again.
It's going to sprout again.
Yeah. And the salt sea isn't going to be the salt sea.
It's going to become fresh.
It's going to be life everywhere it goes.
The Dead Sea, yeah.
All right, so with the inner sanctuary, the overlay of the altar, The inside of the house, chains of gold. Oh, chains of gold, yeah. Overlaid the whole house with gold, until all the house was finished. Also the whole altar that belonged to the inner sanctuary is overlaid with gold. The inner sanctuary, he made 2 cherubim of olive wood, each 10 cubits high. Now I find this fascinating that the cherubim were also embroidered in the curtains of the tabernacle.
Yeah.
They knew what they looked like.
And they were on the ark as well. They're so if you have a box, let's pretend this is the ark. You have a cherubim on either side of the ark with the wings touching, okay, over it. But in the back of the Holy of Holies, you would have a 15-foot wide cherubim, the wings spread out, and they would touch tips, and another one over there. And if you look at Ezekiel chapter 1, you kind of got the same kind of a concept where the cherubim looks like they're guarding the ark. Remember, he put a cherubim in Eden, to guard Eden. So the kind of a concept there of 2 cherubims at the back of the Holy of Holies.
So let's talk just a little bit about syncretism as we close.
Yeah.
A lot of archaeologists, a lot of illustrators illustrate cherubim as if they were the winged bulls of Babylon. Well, wrong culture, wrong direction, wrong everything. Ezekiel says they had the form of a man, not the form of a bull, form of a man. And it goes on to describe them in details. So you will often see that. Don't be overwhelmed by it. The Bible gives us a description of the cherubim, and why people would take the winged bulls of Babylon and try and say these are the cherubim of Israel, I do not know.
Yeah.
But the Bible gives us a description that these are in the form of a man, and it gives us into quite a bit of detail. These guys apparently knew what they looked like.
We'll get into more of that next week.
Yeah.
Lord, thank you again for your word. We love you for it. You cared so much that you wrote us a letter, a long, very long letter to understand and to command us, Lord, to follow your ways, so that we'd be pleasing to you, not to be cumbersome, not for it to be a problem for us, so that we would be blessed in this life, at least in our hearts, and then we be blessed in the next as well. So we're very grateful for it, Lord. I thank you for this church and the churches represented here and the believers of this earth. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. We're